If you're in the market for a city car that comes with an added dose of crossover, then your options are fairly limited. One car that does fit that bill is this, the Suzuki Ignis. It seems to offer a great blend of practicality, affordability and, like I said, those funky crossover looks. But is it any good? Well, let's find out. So what is the Suzuki Ignis? Like I hinted at in my intro, it's perhaps a bit of a confusing one. And why is that? Well, when you first see it, you'll notice it's quite a tall car. You'll also notice those roof racks and the slightly flared out arches, and you'll start to think that this is just another SUV. But you then remember that Suzuki already made one of those in the form of the Vitara. You then get a little bit closer to this car, and you realise that actually it is very small. You'll also then take in the very narrow wheels and start to realise that this makes a lot of sense for moving about in an urban environment. And one cool fact about the Ignis that I like is that depending on spec, this car comes in at way under 900 kilos. And talking of spec, you can have your Ignis in one of 3 flavours. The range kicks off at £12,249 for the SZ3 model. An extra £1,500 on top of that will get you into a mid-spec SZT car, whilst the top spec SZ5 model is another £1,000 on top of that. Now, to be fair to Suzuki, the top spec car can be had with an all-grip 4-wheel drive system, and that means the car's crossover looks aren't just for show. So what about the car that we have here? Well, this is a mid-spec SZT model, and that means that over the base car you do have some nice 16-inch alloy wheels, as well as the aforementioned roof rails. There's a fair bit extra going on inside too, but we'll get to that a little bit later on. Now, whilst we're on the outside, what do you think to the looks? From my experience, this car seems to be a little bit Marmite. Some people seem to really like it, but others think it's perhaps a little bit too quirky for its own good. Personally, I'm a big fan. I do like cars that do things a little bit differently, and this sort of mini crossover look to this one is quite charming, and I think it's quite a funky looking little car. Around the front, I do like the headlight design, and that's going to sound odd, but the LED strip in them does look really cool at night. I'll put a photo on screen now of that. I also like the number plate on this one. Pointless thing to say because every car's going to have a different number plate, but this one is quite cheeky, so I quite like that. Coming down the side, like I say, nice 16-inch alloys on here. Lifestyle touch with the roof rails. Back here with these 3 slats, these are harping back to the Suzuki SC100, I believe, of yesteryear, so that's a nice touch. The back windows are also tinted, which again adds to the lifestyle vibe of this car. Unfortunately, whilst I'm around here, hopefully you can still see me on camera. From here, this is where I think the car looks the most awkward. I think the narrowness, so you've got the very narrow tyres and the narrow stance to the car, and it is quite tall, just make it look a little bit awkward. But I think from everywhere else, this is a good looking little car. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Right, I'm aware I keep calling this a little car, so what about the practicality? Well, around the back you'll find a thoroughly decent 260 litres of versatile space. Now, what do I mean by versatile space? Well, on both the SZT and SZ5 models you can slide the back seats forward for a bit more room, which I think is quite a handy feature. Unfortunately though, when them seats are folded down, there is a big lip present. I don't think that is going to be to everybody's taste, and I also think the lack of a light in the boot is perhaps a little bit tight on Suzuki's part. It is also worth mentioning that due to the gubbins required to send power to the back wheels, models fitted with the all-grip system only have 204 litres of boot space. So in the back, it is worth noting that the sliding seats do come at a cost, and that is because in the cars with the sliding seats, so that is anything that is SZT or SZ5 specification, you only have 4 seats overall instead of 5. The base spec car has a different bench back here, it doesn't slide, and it is a 3-seater back here, which means overall you've got 5 people can sit in here. Realistically though, I don't think this is going to be too much of an issue, as you've probably gathered by now in this video, this car is quite narrow, and I think trying to fit 3 back here would be a little bit excessive. On the space front though, for 2 people, obviously it's only a 4-seater now, I think there's plenty of room. Ignore my silly hat, it's freezing today, so I feel like I'm getting hypothermia, but as you can see, plenty of headroom. I'm 5'11", that's in my driving position, I also have plenty of knee room. In terms of luxuries though, not really much going on back here. There are bottle slots in the doors, there's another cup holder there you could use, there's a thing there, and you have Isofix and one windows. Yeah, so not really much to talk about back here, to be honest. Right, so the front of the Suzuki Ignis, what is it like? Well, my first impression when I got in here was just how big and spacious and roomy it feels. I was surprised. It is a small car, but like I say, it feels like you've got loads of space up here, which is nice. It's also a very easy car to get in and out of. Looking out, you've got plenty of visibility, and you do also have a slightly raised driving position, which is always a bonus. Coming in, I don't really want to comment too much on the interior plastics because you do get what you pay for, so it isn't the most luxurious place to be, but I do think it is styled well enough, to be honest. You've got some nice carbon effect trim around some of the vents. You've obviously got your white bit here that breaks it up, as well as your orange accents slightly further down. Here you have a 7-inch infotainment panel, and that is where your sort of infotainment and everything is controlled. Obviously, that's where your infotainment is controlled. It's an okay system, but the best thing about it is it comes with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, so therefore you just go plug your phone in and use that, as honestly it is much more intuitive to use than the sort of standard system that this car has. Coming down here we have manual air conditioning. Don't think that's too much of an issue. You do have to step up to the next spec car, the SZ5, sorry, to get automatic climate control, but to be fair, manual aircon isn't too much of an issue. Coming across here, you do have a nicely simplistic panel in front of you, so you've got your rev counter and your speedo, as well as a little screen off to your right. Now the screen off to your right I'm quite a fan of. It shows you various bits of trip information, and my favourite thing to have on there is my hybrid settings, which I'll go into more detail in slightly later on. You also have some multimedia controls on your steering wheel. Now just to finish off this inside bit, I did just want to touch on one thing I find a little bit disappointing about the spec. You see, for the most part, this SZT model offers everything you'd want. You've even got a rear view camera, actually, I forgot to mention that. However, it does miss out on any active safety tech. You have to step up to the SZ5 model for those. I feel like that's a bit of a shame, but perhaps the extra £1,000 required to make that leap is worth it. Right, so just to confuse matters a bit here, since filming this review, Suzuki have announced the facelift for the Ignis. As a result of that, I just wanted to make it clear that everything I say in this review relates to the pre-facelift car. So as into that, this car is fitted with Suzuki's mild hybrid system. This system is made up of a battery and an integrated starter generator, and it is said to help enhance fuel efficiency by giving the petrol motor a little helping hand from time to time. And talking of the petrol motor, this Ignis is powered by a 1.2 litre 4-cylinder naturally aspirated unit that puts out 89 brake horsepower and 88 foot-pounds of torque. That results in a 0 to 62 mile an hour time of 11.8 seconds at a top speed of 106 miles an hour. So what is the Ignis like to drive? Well, to start us off for this section of the video, I've took us to an urban or town driving environment, as perhaps unsurprisingly that is where this car feels most at home. Thank you, Google. Yeah, this is mostly where this car feels. This is where this car feels most at home. It's an absolute breeze to drive. It makes for a brilliant runabout and is absolutely fantastic at just doing your day-to-day jobs without any issue at all. Now, the 1.2 litre naturally aspirated engine under the bonnet, I think, is a surprisingly good little power plant. I was expecting it to feel a little bit old school, but it feels rather nippy. It likes to rev. You couple that with a nice 5-speed manual gearbox, and you do nip in and out of traffic fairly easily. Well, very easily, in fact. You've also got a very tight turning circle on this, and couple that with your rear view camera and low-speed manoeuvring is also a doddle. Now, what's the ride comfort like? Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. The car is comfortable, however, the ride can sometimes be a little bit, I think, unsettled is the way to describe it. So what do I mean by that? Well, bigger potholes and sort of speed bumps, if you go over them, I don't know, not even too quickly to be honest, you do get a bit of a thud as you come back down after hitting the said pothole or speed bump. There's also a slight boinginess to the ride every now and again, but I don't really think most people are going to notice that, and for the most part this car is more than comfortable enough. Now, one thing I do think people will notice about this car, is one thing people are going to be glad that they notice, is the fuel efficiency. I've done about 150 miles in this, and I have seen 51.6 miles per gallon, but that number could be improved on quite easily. I was thrashing it around a little bit earlier on for some filming. So yes, the fuel efficiency in this car is fantastic, and it's the first time I've driven something that's returned over 50 miles per gallon, so I'm quite happy about that. Now, I do need to touch on the mild hybrid system, because to be fair, it was designed and it's said to help fuel efficiency. I don't doubt it does, but I need to touch on it in this video. Now, for the most part, I do like this system. You do hear a bit of a whir every now and again, which is quite satisfying because you can hear the technology doing its thing. You do notice it when you're using the stop-start function as well that this car's got. In some cars, well, some of the experience I've had with cars that have a similar stop-start system, or when I say similar, it doesn't have a mild hybrid, the stop-start thing can be quite a crude experience. So you'll obviously be sat in traffic and then you need to restart the engine really quickly when you put your foot on the clutch, and it clatters into life in a not very satisfying manner. The mild hybrid system in this kind of mitigates that. It helps the stop-start be a much smoother, less intrusive system. I do have a bit of a gripe with it though, and that is that every now and again this car requires more braking than you think it does. That is because when you're coasting, the system starts to recuperate energy, so it slows you down slightly more, slightly harsher than the car would be if it was just rolling along normally. Then sometimes you put your foot on the clutch and the brake, it kind of depends how much pressure you're putting on the brake, that recuperation stops, so you then find yourself needing to apply more brakes than you originally thought you did. Don't get me wrong, it's only a little niggle and it doesn't really spoil the driving experience. It's just something that you'd probably get used to be honest. Yeah, around town I really like the Ignis. I think it's a fantastic little runabout. Yeah, and that fuel economy, don't forget that, over 50 miles per gallon, very impressive. Right then, so B roads. Well, obviously out here you have to be a little bit realistic, as it isn't going to be home for a car like this. However, thanks to a fairly willing and quite a rev-happy 1.2 litre 4-cylinder engine under the bonnet and quite a slick 5-speed manual gearbox, you can hustle the little Ignis along quite well and have a bit of fun. That is until you get to a corner mind, because when you get there things start to get a little bit sketchy. And this car does grip well considering how narrow the tyres are. Don't get me wrong, it will go around corners perhaps slightly quicker than you want it to, but it does roll, and that's probably helped by how tall this car is, but it is exaggerated by the fact there isn't an awful lot of bolstering in these seats. So like I say, it grips quite well, but you'll quickly find yourself having to hang on for dear life. I don't know if we're going to be able to demonstrate it, but yeah, there's a bit of roll, but it's not helped by the lack of bolstering. You end up falling out of your seat. So yeah, it does alright out here to be honest, and it is a surprising amount of fun to hustle if you can be bothered. But I think if you don't drive like a lunatic, you're going to be more than satisfied, as it is more than adequate really. Right, so faster bits of road then. Well, I reckon you need to be realistic, as you do with the B road section of this video, because actually this car isn't a Rolls Royce, and what it does is it does the job more than well enough. So it gets up to 70 surprisingly quickly actually. I think the numbers on this car make it sound quite slow, but realistically it feels quite nippy, like there's a fair amount of grunt. Once you're up to speed, it will then stay at speed without issue, and there is also power in reserve for overtakes. And like I say, it just gets you to where you need to be without any fuss really, which is kind of what you want from a car. Now, I was expecting the fact this is only a 5-speed gearbox to be a bit of an issue, but I'm glad to report that actually it's geared quite well. I think 70 is on just under 3,000 RPM, and it isn't too intrusive when you're at speed. So you don't listen, you can't hear the engine too much when you're at speed. But one of the reasons you might not be able to hear it too much is because there is quite a lot of tyre and wind noise going on. I don't know how well my microphone is picking it up. Sorry, I'm just trying to demonstrate the fact you can accelerate to overtake. I don't know how well my microphone is picking it up, but it is quite noisy in the cabin. You can't really do much about that, and it is kind of to be expected, so it's just a point to note really. Another thing I just want to quickly comment on is the stability at speed. It's got very thin tyres, it's quite a narrow and quite a light car as well, quite a tall and narrow car, sorry, so you do expect it to be blown about a bit. To be honest, I was expecting it to be worse than it is. I don't want that to sound like I'm being really negative. This car feels more than stable enough really. I have been driving it around in the wake of a storm this week, so there has been some very heavy winds going across the motorways and stuff, and it's not been too treacherous. I think the only time I was a little bit nervous was when it was really windy, and I'd have been nervous if I was driving anything else, I think, because this isn't the only car in the world that gets blown about when there's heavy wind and you're on a fast piece of road. So yeah, I don't want this car to come across, I don't want this bit to come across as a negative. This car is more than up to the job of getting you where you need to be, and just remember this thing returns over 50 miles per gallon, which I think is really impressive. So how do we conclude this video? Well, the Suzuki Ignis is not the last word in driving dynamics or luxury. But come on chaps, let's be realistic. If you came into this video expecting to find that out, you were bound to be bitterly disappointed. Note what this car offers is plenty of charm on the outside, plenty of practicality and space on the inside. It also doesn't use much fuel, and all things considered, it does drive pretty well. Yes, be a charming car to spend some time with, but I'm a fan, to be honest. I won't buy one, but that's just because it's not the kind of car I would want. So don't let that put you off, is what I'm trying to say there. I reckon though, it's time to wrap this video up. So I've been Bleat, thank you for watching. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.